Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Cosmos channel. Tonight we sit with a question that has followed astronomers home for decades. A question that sounds almost like a riddle told at the edge of sleep. If the galaxy holds so many stars, and so many of those stars hold worlds, then where is everyone? Has the Fermi paradox finally been solved? Or does it simply grow more patient with each passing year, waiting on a porch at dusk for a visitor who may already be near, only unheard? It is a question that has outlived the physicists who first asked it aloud over lunch, drifting from one generation of stargazers to the next, like a lamp passed hand to hand, never quite switched off. Tonight we hold that question loosely, the way you might hold a warm cup you no longer need to drink from, and we let it rest on the rail beside us instead of demanding an answer of it. There are 4 unhurried regions to this night, 4 slow turns around a single porch light, and you do not have to remember any of them, because I will carry each one for you as we go. First, we sit with the question itself at dusk, the numbers of the galaxy laid out like distant windows lighting up one by one, and the strange, comfortable hush where we expected noise. Then, we drift through the gentle explanations, the great filters, the rare worlds, the long clocks of civilizations that may simply never tick in the same century as our own. After that, we settle into quiet, not gone, where the porch light stays lit and the neighbors are only listening, not lost, and the paradox itself eases until it is no longer a puzzle, but a kind of company. And last, we walk the long, unhurried art of listening. How human hands built ears turned toward the stars, what those ears have caught in their long, patient nights, and how easily this all folds into your own rest. If this kind of night is useful to you, a like or a follow helps this porch light reach other windows, other people lying awake with their own unanswered questions, tracing the ceiling the way you might be doing right now. That is only if it feels easy. Nothing here asks anything of you. There is nothing tonight that needs your grip, no answer to reach for, no thread to hold taut. Let your shoulders lower, unclench from wherever they've been carrying the day. Let your jaw loosen. Let the mattress take a little more of your weight than it did a minute ago. Settle in, the way dusk settles over a porch, without asking permission from anyone. Let's begin. And so the evening settles the way it always does, without asking permission, without a sound to mark the change. One moment the sky is doing its long amber fade, and the next it has simply become night, and you are already sitting inside it. Let your shoulders find the chair beneath them. Let your feet remember the floor. There is a porch under you now, wooden and warm from a day of sun it is only just beginning to release, and there is nothing on this porch that needs your attention except the dimming of the light and the questions that dimming likes to bring with it. Because dusk has always been the hour for wondering, hasn't it? Something about the way the edges of things go soft, rooftops losing their outlines, fences dissolving into hedgerows, the whole visible world agreeing to stop insisting on its details, invites the kind of question that daylight is usually too busy to ask. Tonight's question is an old one, older than you might expect, and it was first spoken aloud not on a porch at all, but at a lunch table, in the summer of 1950, at a research laboratory tucked into the hills of Los Alamos, New Mexico. A physicist named Enrico Fermi was eating with a handful of colleagues. The conversation had wandered, the way lunchtime conversations do, past a cartoon about flying saucers into some loose arithmetic about the stars and the odds of company among them. And then, in the middle of an entirely different sentence, Fermi is said to have looked up and asked, almost to himself, 3 small words that have been drifting through observatories and quiet minds ever since. Where is everybody? He didn't mean the people at the table. He meant the galaxy. He meant the vast, star-crowded dark that arches over every porch on every summer night, the dark you can lean your head back and look up into right now, if you like. Though you don't have to, it will still be there, patient, whether your eyes are open or beginning to close. That dark contains, by the careful counting of the astronomers who spend their lives counting it, somewhere between 100 and 400 billion stars, all of them held together in the same lazy pinwheel we call the Milky Way. All of them are neighbors in the loosest, largest sense of the word. Say the number slowly, and it stops meaning anything at all, the way any number past a few thousand does, which is, in its own way, a kind of relief. You are not required to hold 400 billion of anything in your mind tonight. You are only required to sit with the shape of it, a great deal, a street longer than any street, a porch light for nearly every one of those stars, if you wanted to picture it that way, stretching off past where your eyes could ever follow. And here is the part the astronomers have only recently confirmed, the part that would have surprised even Fermi at his lunch table. Those stars are not lonely. For a long stretch of the last century, nobody knew, not really, whether planets were common or rare, whether our own sun's little family of worlds was the exception or the rule. Then came the patient work of counting distant shadows, watching star after star dim by the faintest possible amount as some small world passed in front of it. A flicker so slight it would be easy to miss if you weren't looking with exactly the right instrument, tuned exactly right, for exactly long enough. The Kepler Space Telescope did that looking for 9 years, staring at one small patch of sky the way you might watch a single window across a street, waiting to see if a light moved behind the curtain. And what it found, multiplied out across everything we now understand, is that planets outnumber stars. Not every star has just one, many have several, a whole cluster of small worlds circling a single flame. And a good number of those worlds are the modest, rocky, unremarkable kind, sitting in orbits neither too near their star's heat nor too far from it, in what the astronomers call, with a plainness I've always liked, the temperate zone. The kind of distance where water could stay water. The kind of distance, in other words, that looks a little bit like home. So think of the street again, not one house with its light on, surrounded by darkness, a street with hundreds of billions of houses, and it turns out most of them come with a bit of land attached, and a fair number of those plots sit at just the right distance from their own porch lamp to be pleasant to stand on. Some of that land is barren rock too close to its sun to keep anything but scorched dust. Some of it drifts so far out that whatever water it once carried has long since gone to ice. But enough of it, scattered up and down the length of the galaxy, sits in that easy middle distance, not too hot, not too cold, close enough to its star for the warmth to feel companionable rather than punishing. That is what Fermi was doing. Without quite having the numbers we have now, he was standing on his own porch, looking down a street he already sensed was enormous and well-built, and noticing that for all its houses, he couldn't hear a single voice, couldn't see a single other light moving, couldn't find a single sign that anyone else was out on their own porch tonight, too. If the galaxy is this full, this old, this generous with its raw materials for life, then where, he wondered, is everybody? It's worth pausing here, before we go any further down that street, to notice something about a dark porch. You've stood on one before, or driven past one. Some evening when a house across the way showed no light at all, and you know that a dark window doesn't mean an empty house. Sometimes it means the people inside have already gone to bed. Sometimes it means they're in the back room, where the light doesn't reach the street. Sometimes it means they're simply sitting quietly in the dark themselves, the way you might be doing right now, needing nothing lit at all to still be entirely, comfortably there. A street of dark porches at dusk is not a street of empty houses. It might just be a street where everyone happens to be quiet at the same hour. That's the shape I want to hand you tonight, gently, to hold on to through everything that follows. Not an answer yet, just a shape. A way of letting an unlit window stay a mystery instead of becoming a fear. And that is really the promise of this whole evening, that we are only wondering. Nothing here is being asked of you. You don't have to solve anything, count anything, prove anything before you're allowed to rest. You are simply a person on a porch, turning a question over the unhurried way you'd turn a smooth stone over in your palm, with no deadline attached to setting it back down. The scientists have spent decades doing the harder work of turning that stone under bright lights, measuring its every facet, and tonight all that patient labor is yours to receive without any of the labor itself. You get to keep the wondering and let go of the working. Because it is, when you actually sit with it, a wonderfully strange thing to wonder about. How would you even begin to count the neighbors on a street you can't fully see down? Most of those hundreds of billions of stars are so far away that their planets, even the temperate rocky ones, are nothing but a flicker of shadow you infer, rather than a place you visit. You can't walk down this street and knock on doors. You can't peer through any window close enough to actually see who might be moving around inside. All you have, standing here at dusk with the porch boards still faintly warm beneath you, is starlight that left its source years or centuries or millennia before it ever reached your eye, and a handful of very reasonable, very patient questions about what that starlight might be passing on its way toward you, and what might be waiting, unseen, in the spaces in between. There's a particular comfort in that, if you let there be. A question this large was never going to be answered in a single breath, or a single lifetime, or even a single century, and that means there's no hurry folded into it anywhere. You can set it down whenever you like and pick it back up tomorrow, exactly where you left it, and the stars will have moved so little in that time that no one, not even the most careful astronomer with the most patient instrument, would notice the difference. The porch will still be here. The street will still be this long. Whatever answer is out there, drifting toward us at the unhurried speed starlight always keeps, has already been drifting for longer than any of us have been alive, and it is in absolutely no rush to arrive tonight. So how do you count what you cannot see? How do you take a street this long, and stars this many, and start putting real numbers on the houses, on how many even have a porch light to begin with, on how many of those lights are lit tonight, on how many might have been lit once and gone dark for reasons that have nothing to do with anyone being gone? That, it turns out, is exactly the question a young astronomer sat down to answer 11 years after Fermi's lunch at a small radio observatory tucked into the green hills of West Virginia, turning one impossible, star-sized wonder into something you could actually walk through, porch light by porch light, term by patient term. You wouldn't count them all at once. Nobody counts a street that way. You'd start with what's nearest, what's countable, and let the rest wait its turn in the dark. And this, it turns out, is exactly what one man did. 11 years after that Los Alamos lunch table went quiet with its own question. His name was Frank Drake, and in 1961, at a radio observatory called Green Bank tucked into the hills of West Virginia, he did not try to answer where everybody was. He only tried to write down, in order, everything you would need to know to guess. Think of it less as an equation, and more as a walk down that long imagined street, pausing at each porch light in turn, asking a single manageable question before moving to the next. The first light is the easiest of all and the most patient. How many new stars does our galaxy kindle in an average year? The number settles, across decades of counting, somewhere between 1 and 3, a slow, steady birth rate, a nursery that never stops and never rushes, 1 or 2 or 3 new suns easing into being every year among hundreds of billions already burning. It is a number so calm you could set your breathing to it. And it means the street is not empty and never was. It has always been under quiet construction. New porches framed and lit at an unhurried, dependable pace, going back further than anything we could ever be nostalgic for. The next question used to be the hardest to answer, and is now nearly the simplest of those stars. How many bother to build a family of planets around themselves? For most of the last century, this term was a shrug, a placeholder, a number chosen out of hope more than evidence. Then came decades of increasingly patient watching, telescopes trained for years at a time, on the same small patches of sky, waiting for the faintest, most rhythmic dimming as a world passed in front of its star like a moth crossing a porch light. What they found, gathered together, was almost startling in its generosity. Planets are not rare furniture around a star. They are close to the default. Nearly every star you can see, if you could see closely enough, is keeping something in orbit. Kepler's own long vigil, the one already mentioned once tonight, confirmed it beyond argument. More worlds than suns, spinning in the dark like satellites of light. So the second porch light, once dim with uncertainty, now burns almost as steadily as the first. From there, the street narrows its question again. Of all those countless planets, how many sit in that gentle, temperate band around their star, not so close that oceans would boil away, not so far that they would freeze into stone silence, the so-called habitable zone, the golden middle distance where liquid water could rest on a surface without hurrying anywhere. And here too, modern surveys have been remarkably kind. Small rocky worlds in that comfortable middle distance appear to be common, not rare, scattered generously enough across the galaxy that even conservative tallies land somewhere in the billions. 3 porch lights in, then, and the street is already looking wide, well-built, and thick with real estate. The stars form at a reliable pace. Nearly all of them raise planets. A healthy fraction of those planets sit in the kind of mild, temperate light, where nothing dramatic needs to happen for water to simply lie still and wait. It is only here, at the 4th porch, that the street begins to lean into shadow. Because having a mild, well-placed piece of land is one thing. Whether anyone ever moves in is another question entirely, and it is here that astronomy quietly excuses itself from the conversation and hands the flashlight to biology, which has far less to say with any confidence. What fraction of those habitable worlds ever actually produces life? Not intelligence, not radio towers, just the first stirring of something that metabolizes, replicates, persists? We do not know. We have exactly one sample, our own porch, and you cannot draw a curve through a single point. It could be that life sparks almost anywhere the conditions allow. The way dew simply appears on a cool morning without needing to be summoned. Or it could be so improbable, so dependent on one particular sequence of chemical accidents happening in the right order, at the right temperature, in the right shallow pool or vent or tide, that our own existence is closer to a fluke than a rule. The equation does not resolve this. It only marks the door and lets it stand there, unopened, honest about not knowing. Notice, if you can, how little that honesty should trouble you. An unopened door is not a locked one. It simply hasn't been reached yet, and there is a kind of ease in that. The same ease you might feel standing at the edge of a library too large to finish, knowing the not yet read shelves are still full of ordinary, findable answers. And even if life takes hold, a fifth light asks whether it ever becomes the kind of life that notices itself, that turns curiosity into memory, and memory into culture, intelligence, in the sense we'd recognize as company. Earth waited a very long while for that, life humming along for billions of years as nothing more ambitious than single cells, patient and unremarkable, before anything like a mind assembled itself from the pieces. Whether that wait is typical, some near universal apprenticeship every living world must serve, or whether we simply got lucky on one long, uneventful afternoon among countless dull ones elsewhere, nobody can yet say. Intelligence, seen this way, is not a guaranteed destination. It's more like a light that some houses happen to wire into their design and others never think to install at all, content instead to simply exist, green and breathing, and utterly uninterested in looking outward. A sixth question follows close behind, and it is subtler than it sounds, of the minds that do emerge. How many go on to build the kind of technology that could be noticed from another porch entirely, a radio signal, a beam of light, some deliberate or accidental announcement thrown out into the dark? Cleverness alone doesn't guarantee a porch light gets switched on for the street to see. A civilization could be endlessly thoughtful, could write music and mathematics and long unhurried poems about its own sky, and still never once think to leave a lamp burning toward strangers it has no reason to expect are watching. And then, last and most tender of all the terms, comes the one Drake himself considered the true crux of the whole walk: the length of time, on average, that a civilization keeps that light on once it's lit. Astronomers call it L, and it may be the gentlest, most quietly devastating variable in the whole equation, because it asks not whether someone exists, but for how long they stay knowable, whether a civilization's outward signal is a brief flare, gone in a century, or a long, patient glow lasting tens of thousands of years. A street can be full of houses and still look dark if every porch light only burns for a moment before its owner, for whatever peaceful or unremarkable reason, turns it off again. What's worth resting on, before we walk any further, is how unevenly this whole street has been illuminated by what we've learned since 1961. The astronomical terms, the birth rate of stars, the near universality of planets, the abundance of temperate worlds, have been measured, checked, and largely settled by patient decades of watching the sky. Those porch lights are steady now, no longer flickering with guesswork. But the biological and social terms, life, mind, technology, and how long any of it endures, remain almost exactly as open as they were on the day Drake first wrote them down. And there is something quietly reassuring in that asymmetry, if you let yourself sit with it, rather than rush past it. The unknown is not spread evenly across the whole night sky, it is folded into just a few terms, close to home. Close to something we might one day understand simply by understanding ourselves a little better. The mystery has a shape. It has an address. So run the numbers generously, as Drake himself often did in later years, a few new stars a year, nearly all of them with planets. A healthy share of those planets warm and rocky and patient. And you arrive at a street that should, by simple multiplication, be lined with lit porches almost as far as the eye could wander. Billions of candidates, easily, and yet the night outside stays hushed. If the arithmetic allows for so much company, so many houses with the lamp lit, and someone home, then something else must be quietly working against it somewhere further down that unresolved half of the equation, something dimming the porches, or keeping them dim before they're ever truly lit at all. Not a monster in the dark, just a series of doors, perhaps, that not every house manages to walk through. So the filters are what dim the porches. That is the word a physicist named Robin Hanson reached for in 1996, sitting with the same puzzle you are wrestling with now, and it is a good word to hold loosely in your hands tonight. Because a filter is not a wall. A filter is a fine mesh that some things pass through and some things do not. And Hanson's idea was simply this, that between raw chemistry and a civilization capable of leaving its porch light on for the rest of the galaxy to see, there is a long series of doorways, and every doorway is narrow, and some may be narrower than others. You do not have to count them tonight. You only have to feel the shape of the idea, the way you'd feel the frame of a doorway in the dark with your palm. Unhurried, just to know it is there, solid, standing, letting you pass or not, asking nothing of you either way. The first doorway is the strangest, because it is the one none of us has ever fully seen close. Somewhere on the early Earth, in water warmed by young sunlight, or in the mineral seams beside a deep vent, chemistry became biology. Molecules that were only obeying the ordinary rules of attraction and repulsion began, at some threshold, to copy themselves. Scientists call this abiogenesis, and one of the leading pictures of how it might have happened is the Runa world. The idea that a single humble molecule, ribonucleic acid, once did two jobs at once that today are split between DNA and proteins. It held a simple set of instructions, and it also folded itself into little machines that could act on the world. A molecule that was both the recipe and the cook. If that is close to what happened, then the first doorway may not have needed a miracle at all. Only patient chemistry, and enough time, and enough gentle warmth in enough small pools, which is, if you let it settle over you, rather lovely. The possibility that life's opening act was less a single lightning strike and more a slow, faithful rehearsal, run over and over in puddle after puddle until one performance simply held. But here is where the road narrows again, because having simple, single-celled life is not the same as having something we would recognize as a neighbor waving from a porch. For roughly the first 2 billion years of life on Earth, which is a span of time so long that it makes your whole lifetime and every lifetime that has ever been lived look like a single held breath. The only residents of this planet were small, simple cells, each one sealed and self-contained, none of them with a nucleus, none of them with the intricate internal architecture that lets a cell specialize, cooperate, become part of something larger than itself. And then once, as far as we can tell, it happened. One simple cell folded another inside itself, and instead of digesting it, kept it. And the two learned to live as one. The ancestor of what became the mitochondria that still power nearly every cell in your body tonight, quietly turning the last meal you ate into the very warmth you are feeling under the blanket right now. That single merger is thought to be the ancestor of every complex cell that has ever existed, every plant, every animal, every human who ever watched the sky and wondered. It seems to have happened only once in 4 billion years of trying. One doorway opened a single time, and everything since has walked through the same frame. Biologists have a way of feeling out how narrow a doorway was. Even without watching it open, they look at how long life waited on either side of it, on the reasoning that if a step were easy, evolution, which is endlessly inventive and never idle, would have stumbled through it again and again, in many lineages, at many points in time. This is the heart of what is sometimes called the hard steps model. The eye for comparison appears to have evolved independently dozens of separate times across the tree of life, a design so useful, so reachable, that biology kept rediscovering it like a familiar tune. But the leap to a complex nucleated cell happened once. The origin of life itself, as far as the fossil record and the chemistry can tell, happened once. When a threshold is crossed just once, after a very long wait, and never again despite billions of years and countless species trying every possible variation on the theme, that is the signature of a narrow doorway. Not impossible, but rare. The kind of frame that only lets the light through at a certain angle, on a certain night. There is something almost tender in imagining how many other narrow crossings might sit between those two great ones. Smaller doorways tucked inside the larger frame. The first membrane that learned to hold its contents apart from the sea outside. The first molecule that folded itself into something able to read its own instructions. The long apprenticeship by which a cell learned to store its blueprint safely, rather than leaving it loose and exposed. None of these had to happen. Chemistry does not owe biology anything. And yet on this one porch, across enough patient centuries, each of them did. And this is where the idea turns, toward comfort rather than dread, if you let it. Because if these doorways really are that narrow, if the jump from chemistry to self-copying molecule, or from simple cell to complex cell, is genuinely one of the rarest events the universe stages, then a quiet sky is not evidence that something went wrong out there, or that something is coming for us, or that we are watching the aftermath of some vast and frightening silence. It may simply mean the filter is largely behind us. Earth already produced the Urna world, already produced the one merger of cells, already produced multicellular life, already produced minds capable of building radio telescopes and pointing them outward. If the steepest, narrowest part of the climb is the part we have already climbed, if the great filter sits mostly in our past, in that first flicker of self-copying chemistry, in that once in 4 billion years merger of two small cells, then what lies ahead of us is not a gauntlet still to run. It is simply open road. No looming test still waiting to fail us, just distance and time and the ordinary work of continuing, the way you continue breathing without having to think about each breath. That is worth letting settle for a moment, the way you'd let a stone settle to the bottom of still water. The silence out there among the stars might not be a warning sign at all. It might be a kind of certificate, proof of a sort, that the hardest part of the whole undertaking has already been quietly accomplished. Right here, on this one porch, by processes so patient and so unremarkable in the moment that nobody was there to applaud any of it. No fanfare when the first molecule learned to copy itself. No fanfare, 2 billion years later, when one cell decided to keep another rather than eat it. Just a long, unhurried accumulation of small successes, each one so improbable that it may never have happened anywhere else in this galaxy. And yet, each one, having happened, opening the next door a little wider for everything that came after. Rest in that for a moment. Every civilization that might ever call out across this galaxy would have had to pass through the very same narrow frames life passed through here. And if those frames really are as narrow as the long wait on either side suggests, then their absence from our radio dishes is not a mystery demanding an explanation so much as an outcome the numbers themselves would have predicted all along. Nothing sinister waiting in the dark. Only arithmetic, patient and indifferent, and, in its own way, kind. Which leads, naturally, to a second and easier question. One that sets the filters aside for a while and simply asks what Earth itself might have needed to get this far. Not just narrow doorways of chemistry and biology, but the whole hushed architecture of a planet built, by what looks almost like careful accident, to hold a porch light steady for 4 billion unbroken years. A moon in just the right orbit, holding this world's tilt from wandering. A core still warm enough to stir, deep beneath your feet even now. A shield of magnetism overhead you have never once had to think about, and never will have to, standing quiet guard while you sleep. Whether a house like this one is common on the street, built the same easy way in yard after yard, or whether ours might be something closer to a rare and fortunate build, assembled from a longer list of lucky parts than most, that is the next doorway worth resting your attention on, as the night goes on holding you exactly where you already are. And however many more doorways lie beyond that first one, there is a second way of asking why the street looks so dark tonight. Perhaps our own house is simply an unusual build. In the year 2000, the geologist Peter Ward and the astronomer Donald Brownlee proposed something you can hold like a small stone in the palm, that a world able to hold complex, watching life may be uncommon, not because life itself is rare, but because the setting is rare. Not impossible elsewhere, just uncommon. A porch built from an unlikely stack of carpentry, plank after plank, laid down by chance, none of it guaranteed, and yet somehow, here, all of it held. Picture the first plank going down some 4.5 billion years ago, when a body roughly the size of Mars, astronomers call it Theia, though no one alive saw it, grazed the young, molten Earth in a collision almost too large to picture, and almost too gentle in its outcome to believe. From that impact, debris rose into orbit and gathered itself, patiently, into the moon. That single event did something the rest of the night depends on. It left Earth spinning with a large companion nearby, one whose gravity has been leaning on our axis ever since, holding it steady near 23 degrees, instead of letting it wander and tumble the way a spinning top wobbles when nothing braces it. A world without that steadying hand can tip wildly over millions of years, swinging its poles toward the sun and away again, boiling one hemisphere and freezing the other in lingering, disorienting cycles. Ours does not do that. Because of a chance collision in the earliest dark, our seasons stay mild, our climate stays legible, and the porch light never swings so far that it goes out. And the same impact that gave us this stability also gave us something to measure our nights by, a large, close moon, pulling the tides in and out along every shoreline on Earth. A steady metronome, keeping rhythm long before anyone thought to count it. Beneath your feet, a second kind of patience is at work, one that took even longer to notice than the sky. Earth's crust is not a single sealed shell, but a set of drifting plates, spreading apart at ocean ridges and diving back down into the mantle at the edges of continents, And in that slow churn lies something almost tender in its function. A thermostat. Carbon dioxide dissolves out of the air into rain, washes into the sea, settles into rock, and is drawn down into the earth at the subduction zones, only to be breathed back out again through volcanoes over spans of hundreds of thousands of years. When the planet runs warm, weathering speeds up and pulls more carbon down. When it runs cool, the cycle eases and lets more escape. It is a furnace with no dial and no hand on it, correcting itself over geologic time, keeping the temperature of an entire world inside the narrow band where water stays liquid on the surface for billion-year stretches. Most rocky worlds we have found so far show no sign of such a system. Earth has been running it, unattended, since long before anything alive was here to be grateful for it. Venus, close enough to be a near twin in size, seems to have no such working cycle left, and its surface sits under a heavy, unmoving blanket of heat that no rain has cooled in a very long time. Ours breathes instead. In and out, ocean to rock to sky and back again, on a timescale too vast for any single lifetime to notice, though every lifetime has depended on it completely. There is a third element, one you cannot see, running just under the crust in Earth's molten outer core, a slow churn of liquid iron that generates a magnetic field wrapping the whole planet like an unseen porch railing. That field deflects the steady wind of charged particles streaming from our star, particles that would otherwise strip a thin atmosphere away into space over time. The way it likely happened to Mars, whose own field faded early and whose air thinned into the near vacuum probes find today. Our field has held instead, and because it has held, our atmosphere has stayed thick enough to carry rain, to carry sound, to carry breath. You cannot see this railing, and you will never feel it directly, and yet it has been standing at the edge of every one of your evenings, all your life, keeping the sky exactly thick enough to turn sunlight into the amber color it takes on, right before dusk. And further out, past the rocky worlds, a giant stands watch. Jupiter's mass is so large that its gravity reaches across enormous distances and gathers up much of the debris that might otherwise fall inward. Comets and asteroids swept into its own orbit, or flung out of the solar system, or pulled into impacts with Jupiter itself rather than with us. It is not a perfect shield, and Earth carries the scars of its share of impacts, but the frequency of the largest and most disruptive ones appears far lower than it would be without that outer sentinel doing its unhurried, patient work, orbit after orbit, for billions of years. Think of it as a porch far down the street, standing a little apart, that patiently gathers up the loose stones that might otherwise roll toward your own door. Even the neighborhood matters. Our solar system sits roughly 26,000 light-years from the crowded, violent center of the galaxy, out in what astronomers call the galactic habitable zone, far enough from the core to avoid the density of stars that pass too close to one another, the bursts of radiation from a supermassive black hole feeding on nearby gas, the frequency of nearby supernovae, whose radiation could sterilize a young biosphere before it ever got the chance to complicate itself into something that notices sunsets. We live, instead, out on a calm arm of the spiral, in a suburb of the galaxy rather than its downtown, where the traffic is light and the street stays undisturbed for spans of time long enough for unhurried things, a nervous system, a language, a mind, to accumulate without being interrupted. Closer to the core, the stars sit shoulder to shoulder, and the radiation drifting between them runs high enough that biology may rarely get an uninterrupted stretch of billions of years to work with. Out here, on our quiet arm, the neighbors keep a comfortable distance, and the evenings simply last long enough. Layer these together, and you begin to see the shape Ward and Brownlee were pointing toward. Not one lucky roll of the dice, but many, stacked end on end. A moon that steadies the tilt. A mantle that breathes carbon in a rhythm gentle enough to matter across ages. A core that hums a magnetic field into being. A giant planet standing sentinel farther out, and an address set in an unhurried part of a vast galaxy. None of these, on its own, is so improbable as to seem miraculous. Moons form from impacts elsewhere. Magnetic fields are not unique to us. Large planets orbit other stars in configurations that could plausibly do similar sweeping work. But the conjunction of all of them, arriving together, holding together, for the 4 billion unbroken years complex life needed to go from something simple in warm water to something that builds telescopes and wonders about its neighbors. That particular full house is what may be uncommon. Not forbidden, not singular, simply rare, the way a specific, well-built porch on a specific street is one design among many possible ones, most of them a little less lucky in their carpentry. It softens the silence rather than deepening it. If Earth is a fortunate build rather than an impossible one, then other such houses can exist, should exist, scattered thinly across a galaxy of hundreds of billions of stars, each one needing its own rare stack of circumstance to come together. The numbers are large enough that even a small fraction of luck, multiplied across that many stars, leaves room for other lit windows somewhere out along the street. And that is the turn this movement leaves you standing at. Even if other such porches exist, even if somewhere else the moon plank and the carbon thermostat and the magnetic railing and the sentinel planet and the calm address all came together just as they did here, there is no promise that their evening and hours would ever fall at the same hour. A street can hold many houses, well built and warmly occupied, and yet seem dark, simply because no one happens to be sitting out at the same moment you are looking. Which is where the night's real, gentler mystery begins. Not whether the other houses exist, but whether time and distance would ever let their lights and hours shine across the dark at once. Rest with that for a moment, before the night carries you onward. Nothing about a rare build makes it a lonely one. Rarity, multiplied across enough stars, across enough centuries, leaves room for company. It simply asks that you widen the frame far enough to see it. And widening the frame is exactly what comes next. Not just a longer street, but a longer evening, stretched across distances the mind can only approach a little at a time, patiently, the way you are approaching sleep right now. And even if a house down that long street has all the lucky carpentry ours does, the steadying moon, the breathing crust, the magnetic hush that keeps the air from drifting away into the dark, there is still no guarantee that its porch light and yours are burning on the same evening. This is where the mystery softens into something closer to a lullaby than a puzzle. Perhaps nobody has to be missing at all. Perhaps it is only that nobody is awake at the same hour. Picture the street now, not as a neighborhood, but as a boulevard so long you could walk it for 100,000 years and still not reach the last house. Because that is roughly the width of this galaxy, edge to edge, 100,000 light years of stars settled into their long, unhurried orbit around a center. None of them will circle twice in a single lifetime. And the boulevard itself is old. Not old the way a house or a tree is old, but old the way stone is old. 13.8 billion years since the universe first found its footing. An almost unimaginable depth of evening stretching back before the porch, before the street, before the first star had even finished assembling itself out of hydrogen and patience. Against a span of time that size, a civilization, even a long, storied technological one, is a very small flame indeed. Think of each intelligent species, if there are others at all, as a candle set out on its own porch rail. Not a lamp that burns forever, but a candle, lit at some point, burning for a while, a few centuries, perhaps a few thousand years perhaps. If a civilization is patient and careful and lucky in ways we cannot yet imagine, a few 100,000, and then, eventually, going out, not necessarily in catastrophe. Candles go out, they gutter, they're absorbed into other forms of light, they simply reach the end of their wax, having warmed one small stretch of porch rail for as long as they were meant to. Now scatter those candles across a boulevard 100,000 light years long, and a history nearly 14 billion years deep, lighting at random points along that unimaginable stretch of time, each burning only a heartbeat's fraction of the whole. What are the odds that any two candles are burning at once, close enough to see each other's glow? The honest answer is vanishingly small. Not because the street is empty. Because the street is so long and the night is so deep that flames rarely overlap. Try holding the shape of it in your mind for just a moment longer, the way you might hold the shape of a house you grew up in, from memory, in the dark. One porch might have been lit and gone dark 1,000,000 years before Earth's first single cell learned to divide, its brief glow already a fossil of light by the time our own sun had finished gathering itself out of dust. Another might not flicker into being until long after our own light. Whatever that light turns out to be, whatever shape it takes when it finally goes out, has quietly guttered and settled into the same dark rest as all the porches before it. Between those two candles could sit a gulf of hundreds of millions of years, an emptiness so long that entire mountain ranges could rise from flat ground and wear back down to nothing within it, twice over, 3 times over, and still the gap would not be closed. The street is never fully dark, in the sense that something, somewhere, at some point along its unimaginable length, is almost certainly glowing, has always been glowing, will likely always be glowing a little somewhere, but it is also never crowded. There is no golden hour when every porch on the boulevard is lit at once. No single evening when all its houses hum together with the busy, overlapping warmth of a street party. You are not looking at an empty boulevard. You are looking at one lit candle, on one porch, at one particular and possibly quite lonely moment in an extraordinarily long night, which is not the same thing at all as a boulevard with no other houses standing on it. And even setting aside the vastness of time, there is the vastness of simple distance, which works on any signal the way a whisper works across a large, dark room. It thins, and eventually becomes indistinguishable from the room's own quiet breathing. Earth has been, in its own small way, talking for less than 100 years, radio and television signals leaking outward from our transmitters since the early 20th century, radiating out into the dark at the speed of light, like ripples widening from a stone dropped in still water. But ripples flatten as they spread, and the strength of any wave falls away with the square of the distance it travels, so that doubling the distance does not have a signal strength but quarters it, and quadrupling the distance leaves only a 16th. By the time our ordinary broadcast leakage has traveled only a handful of light years, a distance that on the scale of the boulevard is barely a single porch step past our own front door, it has already faded down into something close to the background hum of the galaxy itself, indistinguishable from static to anything without instruments far more sensitive than we currently possess, trained exactly on the right patch of sky at exactly the right moment, listening for exactly the right pattern in what would otherwise sound like nothing at all. A signal that thin, crossing a gap that wide, is not so much a shout into the dark as a whisper dissolving into the enormous, patient silence of the room before it has even reached the far wall. It isn't that nobody could possibly be listening. It's that our voice, at this distance, is barely louder than the dark itself, and any voice calling back to us would arrive just as faint, just as easy to mistake for the ordinary murmur of the stars. And travel is slower still, so much slower that it barely belongs in the same conversation as light. Voyager 1, the little probe that slipped past the edge of our sun's influence and is, at this moment, further from home than anything humanity has ever built, moves at something like 17 kilometers every second, which sounds swift, which is swift. Faster than almost anything you could picture moving with your own hands. Faster than a bullet leaving a rifle many times over. And yet, if that same small spacecraft were aimed, it isn't. But if it were, at Proxima Centauri, our very nearest neighboring star, it would take something on the order of 70,000 years to arrive. 70,000 years to cross the gap to the closest porch on the entire boulevard. Not to another galaxy, not even to a distant, unremarkable corner of our own. Just next door, and still an amount of time longer than the whole of recorded human history, many times over. Longer than farming, longer than fire kept deliberately in a hearth, longer than language has likely existed in anything like its current form. Even light, moving as fast as anything is permitted to move, needs a little over 4 years just to make that same short hop between neighbors. This is not a discouraging fact. It is simply the shape of the room we live in, a room built at a scale where light itself takes years to cross the smallest distances, and where matter, however swift it seems to us standing on our porch step, is closer to standing perfectly still. So the silence around us was never proof of an empty street. It may only be the ordinary, expected quiet of a boulevard so long, and a night so deep that lit windows rarely find each other, of whispers that fade before they reach the neighbors, of candles burning bright and brief in centuries that never touch. There is nothing frightening in this. If anything, there is something almost tender in it. Everyone, if they are out there at all, is simply too far and too briefly lit to wave to us, and we are simply too far and too briefly lit to wave back. It is not rejection. It is only geometry and time, doing what geometry and time have always done, patiently, without any intention toward us at all. The way rain falls without intending to miss or find any particular blade of grass. And here, for a moment, you can stop counting light years and stop doing the long arithmetic of candles and distance altogether, because numbers were never going to be the way to actually feel a gap that size. So, let the porch step go soft beneath you, and let the calculating quiet down, the way a voice quiets when it has said everything it needed to say. There is another way to know this distance, not by measuring it, but by being carried out into the middle of it, weightless, and simply letting it hold you. And maybe that is the only honest way to hold a distance this size, not by counting it, but by feeling it. So let the arithmetic rest now. Let the porch steps go soft and forgetful beneath you, the way a staircase does in the last minute before sleep, when you can no longer remember climbing it. You are not solving anything anymore. You are simply being carried. Feel it begin at the base of your spine, low and unhurried, a lift with no jolt to it, the way a hand might slide under a sleeping child without waking them. The porch light tips away below you, small as a coal, then smaller, then only a suggestion of orange caught in the dark, like something remembered rather than seen. There is no wind on your face, because where you are going there is no air left to move. There is only the sensation of being held from every side at once, weightless, unfalling, the way you feel for 1/2 second at the top of a swing, except this half second simply keeps going. You cross the line first, the one no fence marks, the one called the heliopause, where the outward breath of our own sun finally runs thin and gives up its hold. You do not feel the crossing so much as you feel a quiet settling, a hush arriving in a room after a door closes somewhere far off. Out here, the solar wind, that endless soft exhale of charged particles pouring off the sun, has faded to almost nothing, and the pressure of the wider galaxy leans gently back against it. And the two forces rest against each other in a boundary so faint it could be a change in a held breath. Something small and old is out here with you, farther along the same road, moving at its own patient walking pace, sending word home every so often, in a whisper that takes light itself the better part of a day to carry. It does not need company. It has been alone a long time, and it is fine. You drift past it without disturbing it, the way you'd pass a lit window at 2 a.m. And simply know, without needing to look in, that someone is awake inside, thinking their own thoughts, tending their own small warmth. Beyond that, there is a long, long hush. A shell of ice and rock and old comet stuff, so vast and so sparse that if you tried to count the space between one drifting fragment and the next, you would run out of patience long before you ran out of distance. This is a place built entirely of room. Nothing here is close to anything. You could travel for what would feel to a small, fast thing, like forever, and still not graze so much as a pebble. Let that be the whole point of it. Emptiness this complete is not a hazard, it is a cushion. Space is not a minefield to tiptoe through. It is closer to the stillest water you have ever floated in, so still that you forget your own weight, so still that the only motion left is the motion you bring with you, gentle and self-contained, like a held breath let out over many, many slow counts. There is no sound out here, and let that be a comfort rather than a loss. Sound needs something to lean on, air, water, some crowd of touching molecules passing a shiver hand to hand, and out here there is nothing close enough to lean on anything. So whatever hush surrounds you now is not an absence waiting to be filled. It is simply the oldest quiet there is, the quiet from before there were ears to need filling, and you are welcome inside it, the way you are welcome inside your own held breath just before sleep takes you under. Reach out one hand, unhurried, and you will not find anything to touch. Not a wall, not a railing, not even a current of air to push against. For trillions upon trillions of kilometers in any direction you might choose, there is nothing solid enough to bump, nothing hard enough to startle you awake. Whole worlds of empty room lie folded into every direction at once, and you are simply floating loose inside all of that room, unbothered, unbounded, cradled by the sheer fact that nothing is close enough to interrupt you. If a bed could somehow stretch itself larger than a galaxy and softer than any mattress ever pressed flat by a sleeping body, it would still be smaller and firmer than this. This is the most cushioned place that exists, precisely because it holds almost nothing at all. Somewhere behind you now, smaller with every unhurried moment, the whole close, warm, cluttered neighborhood of the solar system is falling away. The porch, and the road, and the low fence around the yard. All of it dimming into a single soft point of light, The way a lit window looks from the far end of a long, dark field. Once you've walked halfway across it, you are not afraid of losing sight of it. You know it is still there, the way you know your own front door is still standing even once you've turned the corner and can no longer see it. Ahead, one star has been growing by such a small amount, night after imagined night, that you would need years of patient watching to notice it change at all, and that patience is exactly the shape of the truth. Proxima Centauri sits 4¼ light years off, which means the very glow reaching your eyes tonight left its surface before you can properly remember beginning this journey. Light that has been traveling, alone and unhurried, for more than 4 years, just to find you drifting here in the dark to meet it. You are not closing that distance quickly. You were never meant to. Let yourself be carried toward it the way syrup is carried down the side of a spoon, slow, warm, without any urgency at all, because there is nowhere else this crossing needs to arrive by. If a fast, bright little traveler already out here, moving faster than almost anything humans have built, would still need tens of thousands of years of steady going to reach that faint red ember, then surely you, held and weightless and requiring nothing of yourself, can allow this same crossing to simply take as long as it takes. Time out here is not a countdown. It is a soft, wide room with no clock in it. So stop counting. Let the light do the arriving instead of you. Let yourself be nothing more than a small warm shape drifting through a stillness so complete it could rock you the rest of the way to sleep, borne along between 2 porches that will likely never share the same evening, and that is all right. Because you were only ever here to feel the size of the road, not to finish walking it. And then, somewhere in this drifting, a small natural thought arrives, the way a single word sometimes surfaces just before dreaming, turn around. So you do, slowly, weightlessly, the way you'd roll over once in a bed without ever fully waking. And there, small and pale and terribly far off now, hangs the porch you left. Earth, from out here, is not a bright thing at all. It is a faint blue-white ember lost among 100 other embers, indistinguishable at this distance from any cold, unlit stone. No porch light shows, no sound carries. If some drifting stranger paused exactly where you are floating now and simply looked, they would see nothing that told them anyone was home. No glow, no signal, no proof of a single warm room anywhere on that small dark curve. And yet you know better, because you were just there. You know that underneath that dark, silent-seeming surface there is a whole house full of light, kitchens with their lamps left on, someone's porch swing still faintly creaking, an entire world of quiet lives going on exactly as they always have, simply too soft, too small, too far, to be seen from this distance. Darkness, seen from 4 light years out, was never proof of emptiness. It was only proof of distance. The house was always full. It only looked closed. Let that settle over you now, slow as the light still traveling toward you from that faint red star ahead. If our own bright, busy, crowded porch can vanish into that kind of hush from only a few years' distance away, then maybe every other dark-seeming porch along this long street holds the very same quiet fullness. Someone home. Some low lamp lit somewhere inside. Simply keeping the shades drawn. Simply not making a sound tonight. Maybe silence was never the absence of neighbors. Maybe it is only what neighbors sound like from far enough away. And maybe, before you drift any further, it's worth wondering gently why a house full of light would ever choose to keep its porch so still. And from that far vantage, drifting back toward home the way a held breath eases back into an ordinary rhythm, You can look behind you at your own porch and notice something worth sitting with. From 4 light years out, from 40, from 4,000, Earth's light does not read as inhabited at all. No radio hum reaches that far and stays loud enough to hear. No porch lamp on this scale is bright enough to prove a family is home. And yet you know, better than you know almost anything, that this house is full. Voices in every room, a whole species leaning over the rail of its own evening, wondering about the street. If our own bright, busy porch can look dark and silent from out there, then maybe that tells you something patient about all the others. Maybe the silence was never a report on who is home. Maybe it was only ever a report on how far the light has to travel, and how easily distance mistakes a lived-in house for an empty one. It helps too to notice that even our own light is dimming, and that this dimming is not a tragedy, but a kind of maturing. For a handful of decades, this small planet leaked its evenings outward without meaning to. Early radio and television washing off the atmosphere like water off a roof. Radar pulses thrown out during the wary middle of a century. All of it spilling into space as an accidental signature. But that leakage was never meant to last, and it is already fading. Broadcasting has been sliding for years now into cable and fiber and narrow, disciplined beams aimed precisely at satellites instead of flung loosely at the stars. The wide, sloppy glow of a civilization's early radio years turns out to be a short season, not a permanent habit. Give it another few decades, and Earth may go nearly dark at those frequencies, not because anyone leaves, not because anything is lost, but because a species learns to speak more efficiently, the way a house eventually trades its floodlights for a single warm lamp in the window. If that is true of us, then it is worth imagining it might be true of any porch worth visiting. That going quiet is not the last chapter of a story, but an early, awkward one, closed gently once the occupants grow into themselves. A street can be full of lit houses that no longer bother to shout through open windows, and you would never know it from the sidewalk, and that would be no cause for worry at all. There are other, older reasons a porch might sit still without ever having been abandoned, and one of the kindest was offered back in 1973 by the radio astronomer John Ball, who wondered whether the silence might be a form of manners rather than a form of absence. He called it, with a plainness that still lands softly all these decades later, the zoo hypothesis. The notion that if civilizations far older than ours exist, they may have long ago agreed, the way careful neighbors agree, to let a young household grow up without a crowd of strangers on its steps. Not a cage, nothing so unkind as that word suggests, but something closer to the hush a family keeps around a nursery, or the space a good neighbor leaves around a house that still has its lights dim and its curtains drawn. Under this telling, the sky is not empty, it is considerate. Whatever is out there may simply understand, in a way we are still learning, that a species deserves to reach its own porch light in its own time, without someone older and wiser leaning over the fence too soon. You do not have to believe it fully to feel the comfort in it. The idea that our silence might be received rather than merely missed, that somewhere a great deal of attention could already be resting gently on us, unhurried, waiting for an invitation rather than issuing one. Picture, if it helps, the way an older sibling learns to linger in the doorway instead of the room, present but unobtrusive, letting the youngest one figure out how to stand before offering a hand, not because they do not care, but because they remember what it cost them to learn it themselves. A second, stranger idea reaches even further into the patience of deep time. and it is called the estivation hypothesis, after the biological trick some animals use to sleep through the hottest, least hospitable stretch of the year, rather than force themselves through it awake. Some theorists have suggested that a sufficiently advanced civilization, one capable of processing thought itself as a kind of engineering problem, might find that computation runs more efficiently the colder the universe becomes, that a mind built from matter does its best, longest thinking not in the busy warmth of a young cosmos, but in the vast, patient cold still to come, trillions of years from now, when the background heat of everything has dropped low enough to let information settle without waste. Under this reading, the truly old civilizations are not gone and not hiding nearby at all. They are simply waiting. The way a gardener waits for the smoke to clear before beginning careful, permanent work, resting through the loud early chapters of the universe to do their finest thinking during its long, cool evening. It is a strange thought to hold, almost too large to picture, and you don't need to picture it fully, only to notice the shape of it, which is the same shape as everything else this night has offered. What looks like absence may only be a different relationship with time than the one we are used to keeping. But perhaps the gentlest resolution of all arrived not as a single vivid idea, but as a piece of quiet, careful arithmetic. In 2018, 3 researchers at Oxford, Anders Sandberg, Eric Drexler, and Toby Ord, sat back down with the old Drake equation and asked a very simple question. What happens if, instead of picking one confident number for each unknown term, you honestly admit how uncertain each one actually is, and let every term breathe across the whole range of values it might reasonably hold? The earlier way of doing the math had always multiplied single best guesses together, one after another, the way you might multiply a handful of individually reasonable numbers and be startled by how large or small the product becomes. But uncertainty does not average out so neatly when you multiply it, it stretches. When Sandberg, Drexler, and Ord let each term in the equation take its full, honest range, including realistic pessimism about the harder biological steps, the ones this night has already lingered over, a strange and settling thing happened to the result. A galaxy that looks empty stopped looking surprising at all. In a meaningful share of their outcomes, a lonely, unpopulated street of stars turns out to be exactly what you would expect, not a mystery demanding an explanation, not evidence of some hidden catastrophe waiting for civilizations up ahead, but simply one very plausible shape the universe can quietly take. Their paper carried a title as calm as its conclusion, Dissolving the Fermi Paradox, and its center point is worth holding on to as you drift toward sleep tonight. A puzzle can look enormous only because it was built from numbers pretending to more certainty than anyone actually has, and once the honest uncertainty is allowed back in, a great deal of the tension in the question simply lets go. The way a held muscle lets go once you finally notice you are clenching it. So if you are keeping score, on this particular porch, on this particular night, the silence does not need to be a scream held back, or a warning about some filter still ahead of us, or proof of some lonelier truth about existence. It might be leakage fading as any young signal fades. It might be manners. It might be patience on a timescale too long for us to picture without a little help. Or it might be nothing more than distance and probability, doing exactly what distance and probability always do, quietly, without any hidden intention at all. None of these answers require dread, and that may be the whole point of walking through them slowly, one porch light at a time. Not to arrive at a single verdict about who is out there, but to notice that every honest explanation on offer is a peaceful one. And maybe that is the real comfort waiting underneath all of it, bigger than any single hypothesis. It barely matters tonight. Whether every porch on this long street is lit or dark, occupied or resting, listening or simply living its own unremarkable evening far out of earshot. What matters is the size of the street itself, how far it runs, how many houses it holds, how little of it any one porch was ever built to take in. And that is where this night wants to lead you next, gently, away from counting neighbors altogether and into something quieter still. Just how small your own porch really is against all that distance, and why smallness, of all things, might be the softest place to finally rest your head. So let the silence rest there, unscreamed, unworried, a street of houses that were never empty, only listening in their own patient way. And let your body rest with it, sinking a little further into the cushion of the porch step. Because there is one more number tonight, the last one, and it is not meant to add weight. It is meant to take weight away. The universe you are sitting inside of, the one holding this porch and this street and every dark window down the block, is by current measure about 93 billion light years across, edge to breathing edge, as far as light itself has managed to spread in all directions since the very beginning. 93 billion. You do not have to hold that number the way you'd hold a fact for a test. Just let it pass through you the way a distant train passes through a house at night. A low hum felt more than heard, there and then gone, and you still tucked warm under the blanket the whole time. Inside that span, by the careful, patient counting of instruments built across generations, there drift something like 2 trillion galaxies. Not 2 trillion stars, 2 trillion whole galaxies, each one a wheel or a cloud or a smudge of 100 billion suns or more. Each one its own street of porches, its own dusk falling somewhere on some world you will never see. And our galaxy, the one that holds your porch and your street and every name you have ever known, is only one of those 2 trillion, carrying its own few 100 billion stars in a long, lazy spiral, turning so slowly that a single rotation takes 250 million years. Say that once more, unhurried, and then let it go. 2 trillion galaxies. Hundreds of billions of stars in this one alone. And you, on this porch, in this one evening, wondering where everybody is. Here is the part where the number stops being frightening, if it ever was. Numbers like that can feel, at first pass, like something pressing down. Too much, too far, too many rooms in a house too large to ever walk through. But notice what happens if you stop bracing against it. The way you might stop bracing your shoulders against cold water once you realize the water is warm. The size was never a wall closing in. It was always a floor opening out, wide enough that nothing standing on it could possibly be expected to hold it up alone. Think of what you were quietly assuming, without even choosing to. Some small, dutiful corner of you may have felt, under all this wondering, that the answer to the night's question was somehow yours to produce. That if the sky is this vast and this quiet, someone ought to explain it, and that someone might as well be the person on the porch, right now, turning it over and over. But no single porch was ever asked to explain the street. No single house was ever expected to fill it. You are one small, warm, particular life, breathing slowly on one small, warm, particular world, circling one ordinary star among several 100 billion, inside one galaxy among 2 trillion. And the honest, freeing truth of that arrangement is that the weight of the answer was never sized to fit a person. It was never meant to. It is a street-sized question, a 2 trillion galaxies-sized question, and you were only ever meant to sit on the step and feel the evening arrive. There is a kind of relief available here that has nothing to do with solving anything. It is the relief of finding out, partway through carrying something, that it was never actually resting on your shoulders at all, that the ground itself has been holding it the entire time, and your arms, which you had braced without noticing, can simply come down. Being small, out here, is not the sad ending of the story. It is closer to a kind of shelter. The night does not lean on you to finish it. The dark does not need your explanation before it is allowed to be peaceful. It was peaceful before you started wondering, and it will stay peaceful regardless of where your wondering lands. And somewhere in that fact is permission. Permission to let the questions be large and yourself be small, and neither of those things be a problem. Think, for a breath, of everyone you have ever loved, everyone whose name has ever mattered to you, every argument, every kindness, every long, ordinary afternoon that felt, while it was happening, like the entire world. All of it took place on one porch, on one street, in one small blue corner of one unremarkable galaxy among 2 trillion. And somehow that fact does not shrink any of it. If anything, it does the opposite. It means that everything tender you have ever felt happened inside something almost unimaginably generous. Something with room enough for 2 trillion more stories exactly like it, and still no shortage of space. Smallness, looked at this way, is not a demotion. It is an invitation to stop performing largeness you were never built to hold, to set down the old, tiring habit of believing that mattering requires taking up more room than a porch and a street and one warm evening. You already fit. You were always going to fit. The universe was built at a scale that makes room for you exactly as you are, asking nothing further of you than that you keep breathing, slow and unbothered, while it goes on being unimaginably large somewhere just past the porch light. Picture it as the porch does with the street it sits on. The porch is not required to fill every dark window down the block with light of its own. It only has to be its own good, steady square of warmth, its one lamp doing its one small job, while the street goes on being wide and dim, and none of that dimness asking anything of the lamp at all. Your one life does not need to reach the far side of 2 trillion galaxies to matter, and it does not need to answer for what is or isn't lit inside any of them. You get only to sit here, held by the size of it rather than crushed by it, the way a small boat is held by a very large, very calm sea rather than swallowed by one. The sea does not do anything to the boat except keep it up. And maybe that is the quiet trade at the center of tonight. You came out here with a question about company, about whether the street is truly empty, and what you are left holding instead, if you let yourself, is something gentler than an answer, a settledness, a permission to not know and to be fine anyway, the not knowing turning out to be soft rather than sharp, spacious rather than hollow. The universe does not need a witness in order to be real. The 2 trillion galaxies were spinning long before there was a porch, a street, a you. To count them, and they will keep spinning in the same unbothered way, regardless of whether anyone down here is awake to wonder about them tonight. That is not a lonely fact. It is closer to the opposite. It means nothing about your rest, your breathing, your slow drift toward sleep could ever disturb it. You could not break the universe by looking away from it. You could not break it by falling asleep in the middle of the question. It will simply go on turning, unhurried, the whole 2 trillion of it, while you rest. And yet, here is the small, warm marvel folded inside all that vastness, the one worth carrying with you as the night goes on. Someone did count them anyway. not because the universe required it, but because a slow, patient, remarkably stubborn species on one ordinary porch, circling one ordinary star, decided across many lifetimes to look up and keep looking, and to build generation after generation better and better ways of seeing farther than an eye alone could ever reach. 93 billion light years. 2 trillion galaxies. Those are not numbers the sky handed over freely. They are numbers a great many quiet people spent whole careers, whole centuries, coaxing out of the dark, one measurement passed to the next, like a lamp carried hand to hand down a long hallway. That itself is worth resting in for a moment. Not the size of the universe, but the tenderness of the fact that something as small as us ever thought to measure it at all, and did not stop, and got, slowly, closer to true. And there is something almost funny about it, in the tenderest sense of that word, if you let yourself notice, that a species this small, on a porch this modest, ever had the nerve to try measuring something 93 billion light years wide in the first place. No one required it of us. No law of the cosmos says a small, warm creature on a rock has to look up and start counting. And yet across century after century, unhurried, one lifetime handing its instruments to the next, that is exactly what happened. Small hands and simple lenses slowly working out how far the light had traveled to reach them. So let your shoulders come the rest of the way down, and let that thought sit with you as the last one before the story turns toward how it was actually done. Toward the porches and the patient watchers who first learned to point something at the dark and trust what came back. And that patient measuring, the kind that once only counted lights from a porch step, did not stay content with counting forever. Sooner or later, it wanted to listen. You can picture it almost like a person leaning their ear toward the railing at dusk, wondering if any of those far windows might carry a voice back. Not straining, not afraid of what it might hear, just curious in the unhurried way a listener is curious about a street they already love. That leaning began in earnest in 1960, when a young astronomer named Frank Drake pointed a radio dish at Green Bank, West Virginia, toward 2 ordinary-looking stars, Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani, both close by in cosmic terms, both sun-like enough to seem worth a knock. He called the effort Project Ozma, after a storybook queen of a distant, hidden land, and for weeks the dish simply listened, tuned to a single frequency near the natural hum of hydrogen, the most common note in the universe, on the reasoning that any other listener out there would likely think to tune a radio to that same familiar note. Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani sit only about a dozen light years off, near neighbors as this street goes, close enough that a porch light there would be one of the very first any of us could hope to notice at all. Nothing answered. But nothing answering was never really the failure it might sound like. It was the very first time humanity had built an ear large enough to try, and trying, on a street this wide, was already the whole and lovely point. 17 years later, in 1977, something did seem to answer, at least for a moment. A radio telescope nicknamed Big Ear, listening patiently from an Ohio field as part of a long, slow survey of the sky, caught a signal 30 times louder than the background hum of the galaxy, arriving from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The astronomer reviewing the printout circled the sequence of numbers and letters in red pen and wrote a single word in the margin, "Wow," and the name simply stayed, easier to remember than the string of digits it was scrawled beside. It has never repeated, not once, not in follow-up sweeps by the same telescope, not by any of the others aimed hopefully at that same coordinate since. Astronomers have pointed dishes at that same patch of sky again and again in the decades since, and the street there has stayed dark and unremarkable every time. You do not need this to feel eerie. Let it settle instead as something closer to a shooting star seen once from a porch chair. Gone before you could call anyone else outside to see it too. Real, worth remembering fondly, and never owed a repeat performance to have mattered. A lovely, unrepeatable maybe, filed away with tenderness rather than suspicion. The listening has only widened since. A modern effort called Breakthrough Listen, using some of the largest dishes on Earth alongside optical telescopes tuned to catch flashes of laser light rather than radio waves, now sweeps across roughly 1 million nearby stars, along with the flattened disk of our own galaxy and the smudged light of 100 other galaxies further out, scanning an immense range of frequencies for anything that looks less like static and more like a note played on purpose. Funded in 2015 with a scope no single government project had ever attempted, it is by far the largest such search in history. Its dishes taking turns through the night, the way a good neighbor might take turns keeping half an eye on the whole cul-de-sac. It is the difference between listening for one particular voice on one particular evening and simply keeping every window of the house open, patiently, for years, in case a voice happens to pass by. So far, the street has stayed as it was, hushed, steady, unremarkable in the radio sense. And that hush has become easier to hold without worry the longer astronomers have sat with it. Because absence of a signal was never proof of absence of a neighbor. It only ever meant that nobody happened to be leaning out a window with a radio at that particular hour, on that particular frequency, aimed at that particular porch. And somewhere along the way, the search quietly changed its posture. Instead of only listening for a voice calling out across the dark, astronomers began, more and more, to simply breathe in the air of other worlds and see what it was made of. This is what the newest space telescopes do so well. Not eavesdropping, but something closer to noticing the faint, particular scent drifting from a neighbor's open door as starlight passes through a distant planet's atmosphere on its way to us, leaving behind, in the tiniest shifts of color, a kind of chemical fingerprint. The James Webb Space Telescope, unfolded far past the moon and cooled to a hush of its own, does exactly this. It watches a star dim ever so slightly as a planet crosses in front of it. And in that thin sliver of starlight, filtered through an alien sky, it reads for the gases that, on Earth, tend to mean something is breathing. Oxygen, methane, and stranger molecules besides. Some of its most careful attention has gone to a small red-lit system called TRAPPIST-1, whose 7 planets huddle so closely around their dim star that from any one of them the others might hang in the sky the way a neighboring porch light hangs across a narrow street, near enough almost to wave. One such reading, from a distant world called K2-18b, orbiting a small red star well beyond our own sun, produced a hint in 2023 of a gas called dimethyl sulfide, a molecule that on Earth is made almost exclusively by living things, mostly drifting up from the surface of the ocean. It made for warm headlines and, appropriately, far more cautious astronomers, who were quick and right to say the signal was faint, the chemistry unresolved, other explanations entirely possible, and years of further looking needed before anyone could call it anything more than an intriguing thread worth pulling gently. That caution is not disappointment. It is exactly how careful watchers ought to treat a porch light glimpsed at a great distance, through fog. At an hour when eyes play tricks You note it with real interest. You do not yet knock on any door, and you let the data, slowly and honestly, decide what it was. K218b is only one house on a much longer block. Astronomers already have a modest list of other worlds worth this same unhurried attention, and each year the instruments grow sharp enough to read a little further down the street. So where does tonight's question actually land, after a street this long and a night's walk this thorough? Has the paradox finally been solved? In the way people once hoped for, a single unmistakable signal, one triumphant answer arriving all at once? No, and it may never resolve that way, and there is nothing lacking in that. But solved has a gentler meaning too, and it is the one that fits best here, to understand something fully enough that it no longer troubles you, even without a final photograph of the neighbor's face. And under that meaning, yes, the paradox is essentially understood. Once you hold the astronomy's soft unknowns honestly, once you remember the doorways evolution had to pass through, the rare luck of a steady moon and a shielding magnetic field, the vastness of time that can keep two porches lit at entirely different hours of the same long night, the plain physics of how a signal fades to nothing over trillions of kilometers, and the very real chance that any wise old civilization might simply let its noisy radio years pass like a season and go quiet on purpose. Once you hold all of that together, an empty-seeming sky stops needing an alarming explanation. It becomes, quite simply, what you would expect. A street this large, this old, would look this way whether every house on it were full or nearly every one. The light from most of them simply hasn't had time to reach your particular step yet, or has already come and gone, or was never meant to travel this far to begin with. The silence was never a scream. It was only ever the ordinary hush of distance, doing exactly what distance does, and there is nothing left in it to brace against. And it is worth resting, for just a moment longer, on how strange and tender a thing it is that a species on one small porch ever learned to ask the question at all. That curiosity, passed so carefully from one pair of hands to the next across centuries, eventually built dishes and mirrors and orbiting eyes capable of reading the breath of a world it will never visit. That story did not begin with radio telescopes, or with dishes, or with anything so large as a satellite folded up and sent past the moon. It began much earlier, much smaller, with a single lens and a single patient eye turned upward for the very first time, long before anyone had a word for a galaxy, let alone for the millions of them now known to be out there. Everything since, the counting, the listening, the reading of distant air, has simply been that first small act of looking, handed forward, generation after generation, each pair of hands adding one more careful improvement before passing the watch along. It is that longer, older relay, the whole unhurried chain of watchers before us, that the night now turns to tell, easing back through the centuries the way the last lamps on a street go out one by one, each leaving the next in a little more dark, a little more quiet, a little closer to rest. And that is the whole story, really, not a mystery to be cracked open, but a street to be understood a little better with each visit, and understanding takes patient eyes. Long before anyone wrote an equation on a chalkboard or dreamed up a filter or drew a circle around a habitable zone, someone simply looked up. That is where tonight's watch began, and it is fitting, as your own eyes grow heavy, to walk back along that relay of watchers, one porch light at a time, each one keeping the evening for a while before handing it to the next. Picture the year 1610, a cool Italian night. A man named Galileo, lifting a spyglass he built with his own hands toward a bright wandering dot beside Jupiter. He expects to see a planet. What he finds instead are 4 small companions, 4 moons tracing their own quiet orbits around a world that is not the center of anything, night after night rearranging themselves like lanterns strung along someone else's porch rail. He sketches them by candlelight, unremarkable little dots that undo, in an evening, the old certainty that everything in the sky circles us. It is such a small observation, 4 points of light, a few pages of notes, and yet it is the moment the street widens. Once you have seen that Jupiter keeps its own household, you cannot help wondering how many other households there might be, how many other porches down how many other lanes. Galileo does not answer that question. He only opens the window a little further and, tired, lets someone else lean out of it next. Word of his moons travels slowly across Europe by letter and by ship, city by city. The way news once had to move before it could move at the speed of light, and in each city, someone else takes up a lens and checks for themselves, because that has always been the unspoken rule of this particular relay. You do not simply believe the last watcher, you look again with your own eyes, and only then do you pass the evening on. Move forward across a century and a half, past powdered wigs and revolutions, to a modest observatory in England, where William Herschel and his sister Caroline spend clear nights counting. Not planets this time, stars. Herschel points larger and larger mirrors at the sky and does something almost unbearably patient. He tallies, region by region, how many stars fall inside each little window of view, building from those careful counts the first real sketch of the galaxy's shape, a flattened disk. Ourselves somewhere inside it, rather than at its edge. It is unglamorous work, hours of cold and squinting, and it teaches the same lesson twice over. The street is longer than it looks from any single porch, and the only way to learn its true length is to keep counting long after the counting stops feeling new. Herschel also finds infrared light hiding just past the red edge of the rainbow, invisible warmth, carried on nothing but sunlight, and without knowing it plants the idea that starlight has more to say than the eye alone can hear. Caroline, working alongside him through those same cold nights, discovers comets of her own and keeps the ledgers that make sense of everything they see together, a second pair of patient eyes without which the first count of the galaxy might never have been finished at all. A reminder that keeping watch on a porch is rarely a solitary job, however solitary it may look from the street. And it is exactly that idea, that stars speak in more than visible light, which a young radio engineer stumbles into by accident in 1933. Carl Jansky is not looking for the galaxy at all. He is trying to track down the hiss and crackle, interrupting transatlantic phone calls, turning a homemade antenna slowly through the sky, chasing down static the way you might chase down a draft in an old house. Most of the noise he traces to nearby thunderstorms, ordinary and explainable. But there is a fainter hiss underneath, one that rises and falls on a rhythm matching not the day but the stars, peaking when a particular patch of sky, the dense heart of the Milky Way, swings overhead. He has found the galaxy humming, a low continuous murmur pouring from the crowded center of our own street, entirely invisible to the eye, and entirely real. Jansky never builds a bigger dish to chase the discovery further. He moves on to other engineering problems, mildly pleased with himself, and leaves the hiss he found for others to follow. But the field he opens without meaning to, radio astronomy, becomes, decades later, the very instrument the whole search for company depends on. The reason a listening ear could ever hope to catch something as faint as another porch's light leaking across the dark. That inheritance grows, eventually, into a dish so large it fills a sinkhole in the hills of Puerto Rico, Arecibo. 300 meters across, a great cupped ear turned patiently toward the sky for over half a century. It listens for pulsars flashing like distant lighthouses. It maps asteroids passing near enough to matter, and once, in 1974, it briefly speaks rather than listens, sending a compact radio message toward a cluster of stars 25,000 light-years away. A message that will not arrive, if it arrives at all, until long after every person who built the dish is gone. That single outward pulse says something gentle about the kind of species we are. Willing to leave a light on for a stranger we will never meet. Willing to trust that some future porch, however far off, might notice. Around the same years, 2 small spacecraft carry a fainter version of the same gesture. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, launched in 1977 to tour the outer planets, each carries a golden record bolted to its hull, greetings in dozens of languages, birdsong, whale song, a heartbeat, Bach and Chuck Berry, a diagram explaining, patiently, where and when this journey began. It is our own porch light, folded into metal and gold and sent drifting outward, past the planets, past the heliopause, into the long dark between the stars, with no expectation of ever being read, only the soft insistence that if anyone out there happens to pass close enough, they should know someone here was thinking of them. Both Voyagers keep moving even now, faintly calling home across the growing distance, carrying that message onward toward a future none of us will see arrive. And then, in 2009, a different kind of instrument takes up the watch. Not a dish tuned for whispers, but a space telescope named for a mathematician who never lived to see a single planet found around another star. The Kepler mission stares, unblinking, at one small patch of sky for years, watching over 100,000 stars at once for the tiniest, most patient kind of clue, a star's light dimming by a fraction of a percent as a planet crosses in front of it, then dimming again on schedule, and again, a heartbeat repeating in the data. Out of that long watching comes the settled answer this whole night has rested on. Planets are not rare exceptions scattered thinly through the galaxy. They are the rule. Practically every star holding at least one world in its arms. Kepler proves, more thoroughly than anyone before it, that the street is lined with houses after all, more houses than lamps to count them. Small rocky worlds turn out to outnumber the giants, tucked in close orbits and far ones, some catching their star's warmth at just the gentle angle that might let water stay liquid on their surface. Not proof of anyone home, only proof that the porches themselves are common, that building the house was never the rare part. Each of these watchers held the evening for their turn, and then, in their own way, set it down. Galileo's spyglass replaced by better lenses. Herschel's tallies folded into whole surveys. Jansky's antenna the seed of dishes he never lived to see built. Arecibo eventually falling silent and still, its collapsed dish now resting in the hills the way any watcher rests when the shift is over. The Voyagers drifting on regardless, needing no one to tend them anymore. Kepler's own fuel finally spent, its cameras closed, its data left behind like a long letter for others to keep reading. None of them finished the search. None of them needed to. Each simply kept faithful watch for a while, in their own quiet hour, and passed the porch light onward. And that passing is happening even now. Even as your own eyes soften and your breath settles lower and easier into the mattress. Dishes somewhere turning on their mounts. A telescope somewhere holding its long patient stare on some ordinary yellow star. You do not have to keep watch tonight. That work belongs to hands awake somewhere on the far side of the planet, tending instruments built by people who came before you, for questions that will outlast you and everyone you love. And that is not a sad thought. It is the softest kind of company there is. The street stretches out in every direction, dark porch after dark porch. And here on this one, yours, the light is already dimming, the evening already folding itself down and down, the whole vast patient search continuing without you, needing nothing more from you now than to rest. Tonight has been about a question left standing at dusk on a porch that never really needed anyone to explain it, only enough time to be trusted. Tonight has been about numbers wide enough to hold whole galaxies of maybes, billions of stars, and billions of chances folded into a single evening sky, and about how strangeness can be beautiful instead of alarming, how a long silence can be good manners instead of an absence. Tonight has been about the gentle explanations, the filters that may thin a crowd down to almost none, the rarity of a world tuned just so, the long clocks of civilizations that might rise and rest in centuries too far apart to ever wave to one another, missing each other the way two porch lights on opposite hills might miss each other across 100 years of dusk. Tonight has been about quiet, not gone, about neighbors who may simply be listening rather than missing. A paradox that eases the longer you sit with it. The way a held breath eases once you remember you can let it out, the way an empty-looking street can still be full of people who are simply indoors, unseen, warm. And tonight has been about the long, unhurried art of listening itself, dishes turned toward the sky for lifetimes, patient nights of static and hope, human hands doing something as tender as leaving a porch light on for whoever might eventually walk up the road, not because someone is expected, but because it costs so little to leave it burning. None of this needs anything from you tonight. Not a memory, not a conclusion, not even your attention any longer. You do not have to decide whether the paradox is solved. You do not have to choose an explanation to believe, or hold the filters and the rare worlds and the long mismatched clocks in any order at all. You can let every equation, every hushed neighbor, every distant, listening dish drift out of your hands now, the way a held thread finally goes slack once you stop needing to check that it's there. Whatever answer the universe is keeping, it can keep it a while longer, patient as it has always been, while you rest. Another exploration is already waiting just on the other side of this one, cued and ready, and you don't have to do a single thing to reach it. Let it begin on its own, the way a porch light comes on by itself once the sky has gone dark enough. You can stay exactly where you are. If a thought is yet awake somewhere in you, let it be only this, unanswered. If someone were listening back tonight, from some far porch of their own, what do you think they'd notice first about this small, patient planet? And you don't have to answer that. Not tonight. Not ever, if you don't want to. Just let the question rest on the rail beside you, unbothered, while your own light lowers. Feel the weight of the blanket settle a little further into the mattress with you. Feel your breathing lengthen, each exhale a little longer and a little easier than the one before it. Feel your hands, wherever they are resting, grow heavy and unhurried, done now with holding anything at all. Feel your eyelids, if they haven't already, growing too heavy to be worth lifting. The porch has gone hushed. The road has gone silent. The whole wide, star-scattered dark outside has settled too, not because it emptied, but because everything in it is simply resting the way you are resting now. There is nowhere else to be, and nothing left to listen for except your own breath, lowering, lingering, going out like a light no one needs to switch off, because it was only ever waiting for you to rest. Sleep well.